Once a Marine, always a Marine, James Monroe Sterner believes. Joining in military service takes a lot of courage. Sterner showed this through all of his training. Even though his brother doubted him, he proved him wrong by enlisting himself in the military and showing his brother that he can do it as well.
James Monroe Sterner was born on November 14, 1957 in Reading, Pennsylvania to George Sterner and Irma Sterner. There, Sterner worked at their family's sawmill. James Sterner also had an older brother named George Charles Sterner who was also in the military. George Charles Sterner was involved in the Vietnam War and came back with shell shock. When James Monroe Sterner told his brother that he was going into the military, his brother said, "You're never going to make it."
Even though he was quite nervous, like any person would be joining the military, Sterner enlisted by himself. To do so, he went to the recruit center in Reading, Pennsylvania, and signed up there. They ended up taking him to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to finish all the testing that he needed to do prior to entering. One of Sterner's main reasons for joining the military was because he really wanted to follow his older brother's footsteps and wanted to prove him wrong.
And I went into the Marine Corps because my brother was in there, and I figured if he can do it, I can do it. So I want to prove something to myself and to him.
As he explained, the other main reason being because he wanted to prove to himself that he could do it and see if he could handle it.
After enlisting, Sterner did basic training. As Sterner said,
It was strict. You really had to pay attention to what you're doing and listen to the drill instructors and don't make mistakes. Because if you become a private, when you first go in, you don't want to say "I" because you can get poked in the eye.
one of Sterner's favorite parts of training was how he learned to become super independent and way stronger.
The hardest part of training was in boot camp to keep yourself together so you wouldn't flip out, because once you were in boot camp, on where I was, there's only one way on and one way off that island. And a lot of people did decide to go AWOL, and they never made it.
Said Sterner. The instructor that really stood out to him was a really skinny sergeant that loved running them into the ground.
This was one of his basic training instructors. During basic training, Sterner witnessed a traumatic experience. While in grenade training, someone had messed up and bad things happened. As Sterner said,
They call milk in the grenade, and it got blown him up and the instructor up. And so you got to really pay attention and hold on to that thing.
Sterner learned a lot from this experience. He realized that he had to pay very close attention when training. As he
Pay
said,
attention and know how to do it. If not, you won't be here no more.
after basic training, Sterner did many other training sessions. This included desert training, cold weather training, and other training, where he had to learn how to survive out in the field. Desert training, as Sterner
Desert training is more or less going out in the deserts like 29 Palms and learning how to survive out there in the heat and what you can eat off the desert areas.
He recalled that it was very hot out there and they could only really train in the mornings because later in the day it would become too hot and they would have to put the red flag up, which means they could not do any more activities out there.
cold weather training was when they took the trainees out in nothing but snow. They later taught them how to cross-country ski, snowshoe, and build shelter.
It was very cold, but you knew how to take care of it once you built that cave and crawled in it, and they taught you how to make a fire that it wouldn't melt the snow and it would cave in on you.
Sterner later had orders to go to Camp Pendleton, California, where he became an 81mm mortar operator.
The 81 millimeter mortar comes in the basics 4 parts. You got the base plate, the tube, and the bipod, and they get put together once you have it set up, and then you have the sight also to put on, but you don't put the sight on until you sink the base plate into the ground.
It took him around 2 years to achieve the name of a mortar operator, since it was very tricky dealing with these machines. But it only took him around 4 months to perfect it. Sterner went from having no stripes to having 1 stripe as a PFC or private first class, and eventually got a stripe with cross rifles in the middle as a lance corporal. Sterner enjoyed being a lance corporal because
You were little bit in charge of the PFCs and the privates, the ones that didn't have stripes. So you have to help them along and help, and then learn how to become up to your next command.
Sterner also had some unique experiences along the way. The only very unique experience Sterner remembers was when they went into Georgia at a parade and people were throwing things at them and spitting on them. He believes they were spitting at him because many were upset about the Vietnam War.
Although there were negative aspects of the Marines, he did have a friend during the service. They stayed friends for a year and a half until he moved back to California. Friendships are hard to make during the service because the main thing they need to worry about is themselves, not friendships. Sterner learned to stay focused no matter where he goes. Anything can happen.
No matter which way I go, I keep an eye behind me.
Mr. Sterner recommends that you should join the military and make a career out of it.
If you can make the 20 years or longer, I'd do it, and you can have a better life out of it.
He also wants people to know that the military can change a person's life completely. A motto that Sterner will always live by is,
Motto is once a Marine, always a Marine. There's no such thing as ex-Marine.
Sterner would join the military again if the U.S. needed him. He wants to protect the nation, even at his age.
The book that Mr. Sterner received when he was done with his service had multiple memories of training, equipment, and drill instructors. The front of the book had Parris Island and his military number 202. It talked about where he stayed, where he got his haircuts and uniforms, and talked about dental and eye exams. The biggest of them all was how to make the bed.
And of course, the main thing is they teach you how to fold sheets on your bed. Or you don't call them a bed in there, you call them a rack.
After he received all the materials needed to start training, he got his rifle. He learned how to do close-order combat with the bayonet and learned how to take apart the rifle and clean it as well. When they finished understanding the basics of how to use and clean a rifle, they had then got taken to the rifle range by their instructors and started shooting targets. Mr. Sterner earned the Marksman Medal while he was in training.
The number one rule that he knew was to always keep your gun down, never point it at anyone, and to always listen to your drill instructors. Then, he learned how to survive in the wild. Mr. Sterner figured out many tips and tricks and how to live in the wilderness. When he had completed this, he was required to do strength fitness. To finish this, the instructors make the men run every so often and do physical exercises to show worthiness.
There are also obstacle courses that he had to do too. He had to find ways to finish it correctly without getting injured. If the rookies don't do it right, there are high chances that the men can get easily injured. Two big challenges that he had to complete were the gas chamber and combat training. The gas chamber was when you had to go into the chamber and put on a gas mask in a matter of seconds. If you fail to put on the mask, they will be coughing a lot. The combat training was crawling under barbed wire with live ammunition being fired over your head. So you didn't want to stand up while doing this.
One of the last activities Mr. Sterner had to complete in his basic training was pugil stick training. This is where you learned to fight. Once he has completed all these challenges, he gets fitted for his uniform. The instructors need exact proportions.
He left in the summer of 1977 and returned back home. When Mr. Sterner arrived home from the Marines, his family and friends were happy to see him. After all the work he did, he decided to relax for a little while and then continue working with his father. Then he got a job at a meat factory. He had become a better man, he believed, after entering the Marines.
In the end, Mr. Sterner demonstrated that he was able to show courage, capability, and strength to complete his basic training in the Marines, and prove to his brother that he could do it just as his brother did. Thank you for serving our country, Marine Lance Corporal James Monroe Sterner.